to extortion, illegal gambling, arson, loan sharking, and labor racketeering.
Faces of the accused because they are presumed to be innocent. This sweep, more than 100, New York, New Jersey, Rhode Island, involving 7 mob families, the 5 New York families, the Gambino, Genovese, Colombo, Bonanno, and Lucchese families, as well as the smaller New Jersey family, the Cavalcantes. They are believed to be the inspiration for The Sopranos. And in New England, as well as a slew of bookies, middle management, and other...
So here's the proof, huh? Give the story because it's better than the truth, huh? Allegories will keep between me and you, huh? We get coins, never scraps. See this a Bitcoin getting cat. So here's the proof, huh? Give the story because it's better than the truth, huh? Allegories will keep between me and you, huh? We get coins, never scraps. See this a Bitcoin getting cat. So join, started federal, grabbed a Colombo. See proof of work, I made it legible. Move out to cyber, was keeping crimes off of the web for you. Started a special group, yeah, I went private. Fell in love with Bitcoin and started mining. That's when I started shining. Getting green, dropping gems. Rocking the comic club, got them sent. They laugh, popping limbs. Give them life, here's the boost. Gotta put in the work, here's the proof. So here's the proof, huh? Give the story because it's better than the truth, huh? Allegories will keep between me and you, huh? We get coins, never scraps. See this a Bitcoin getting cat. So here's the proof, huh? Give the story because it's better than the truth, huh? Allegories will keep between me and you, huh? We get coins, never scraps. See this a Bitcoin getting cat. So join, get it back.
Welcome to episode 2 of season 2. This will be a very short season because I've got a month until until New Year's, and we're going to start season 3. So season 2, I'm going to try to get in a few episodes. It felt good getting in that episode I did earlier today regarding what happened to my house and the whole story behind why I dropped off for about a year as I got dispossessed and had to rebuild and move back in. Also, the camera, I just gave up on trying to get the camera just right for these first few videos. I'll go back to the SLR and reconfigure it. I'm just using a webcam now that will have to do, even though the quality isn't as good as I'd like. The topic I wanted to discuss for this show was Bitcoin. I haven't done a show on Bitcoin in a while. A lot has happened in the last year since I probably did an episode on Bitcoin. And we are back in a position now where Bitcoin's coming up in a lot of conversations I'm having with people, which is usually an indication. I don't have to look at the price. If I just gauged it on people reaching out to me in conversations, unprompted conversations, I know that the Bitcoin bull run is upon us based on that. It was a crazy last couple of years, as everybody knows, or if you don't track it too closely. Bitcoin shot up to highs of 69,000. I guess it was like 2021. And then it crashed, and it went down all the way to 16,000 as a low. And there was a lot of reasons for that, for both of those things that happened. We had the pandemic that occurred, and then which is considered kind of a black swan event. And we had a lot of things that occurred after that. We had Terra Luna collapse. So we had some shit coins collapse. We had the Celsius, which was a Bitcoin crypto related type of service where you could post your Bitcoin, provide that Bitcoin, and they would pay you interest on that. And then of course FTX with SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried, being arrested and indicted, and the collapse of, I think it was like a $9 or $10 billion exchange. So I want to talk about how all of that played a role in all of this and where we are right now. So we saw Bitcoin go up to 69,000. Really what I think prompted the start of the slide was that Elon Musk had purchased, I don't know, I think it was like $1 billion of Bitcoin. And then, which started a lot of the pumping, which is always nice, I guess. People always ask, what do you think about that? If I had my say, I would rather, I don't like it. I don't like any like celebrity personalities getting around Bitcoin, just because they're invariably will disappoint, and they'll invariably do or say something stupid or in their own self-interest, which could cause, a pump that shouldn't happen, or a crash that shouldn't happen. In this case, Bitcoin was due for a price increase around that time anyway. And what we ended up around 2020 because of the halving. But what ended up happening was everyone saw Elon was buying some, so a lot of people got interested in it. And then in the summertime, I don't know, less than a year later or so, Elon tweeted out that they sold a ton of their Bitcoin. And he'd also tweeted a bunch of things that showed he really didn't have good grasp on the fundamentals of Bitcoin, tweeting things about, improving the efficiency of Bitcoin so that it could, process, more transactions with less energy, and which really misses the point of Bitcoin. Bitcoin's built like a tank. It's built to be kind of slow. It's built to be deliberate. It's built to be impenetrable. It's not built to, on layer one at least, to be this thing that is going to be super quote unquote efficient, because when things are efficient, that means in order to attack it, you could be, efficient too. You don't need a lot of power to attack things that are protected by low power. So the Bitcoin proof of work protocol, in the process in which Bitcoin transactions are basically verified and validated, and how blocks are discovered, consumes a tremendous amount of electricity, which means that for anyone looking to corrupt the blockchain, they would need at least theoretically 51% of that energy. And so the more computers that throw energy towards mining Bitcoin, the better protected every single transaction on the blockchain is. And so I try to explain to people that, if I'm going to invest my life savings into something, I want it to be bomb-proof. I don't want it to be built like a fuel efficient, hybrid Toyota Prius. I want it to be built like a Sherman tank. And that's what I want. And I could add anything I want to the Sherman tank, but I know that the Sherman tank is rolling down, Main Street, and no matter how many rocks and, bricks are thrown at it, that it's not gonna matter. And so a lot of these other coins, like to say, well, we've improved upon Bitcoin, as if Satoshi didn't contemplate building a quote unquote efficient blockchain, and that they've now improved upon it, which would be similar to saying, if you look at the way the U.S. Constitution is drafted and the way due process works in this country. I always laugh when people talk about these coins and how much better and faster. I say, well, yeah, there are countries that have, you don't have a right to an attorney. You don't have a right to a trial. So when you get arrested, they can say, hey, our criminal justice system is way more efficient than the U.S. From time of arrest to time of execution is 3 days. Completely efficient. That's not efficient, right? That's an indication of a lack of due process that is designed to be slow. Due process in the criminal justice system is designed to be slow. That's how you prevent people getting emotional and executing the wrong person in 3 days and saying, oh, geez, I guess we should have probably pumped the brakes and maybe given them a lawyer to make some arguments. No, it's designed to be deliberately slow. So when people try to prove on the U.S. Constitution in those ways, it's kind of funny and very similar in my mind. I look at when people try to say, we're going to prove upon the Bitcoin protocol, and then they get rid of the due process, which is the proof of work, which is all the electricity around making sure that every transaction that's put on this ledger is 1 billion% legitimate and can never be changed. That needs to be a power hungry process, so that that no group, no matter how rich they are, can just pay somebody to manipulate the blockchain, and so that your wallet that you thought had $1 million of Bitcoin in it on Tuesday suddenly has $10 in it on Wednesday. Nobody would want to be a part of a blockchain like that. And so, so the kind of FUD, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt that Elon kind of triggered with that tweet, and this idea that he said, well, Tesla's not going to take Bitcoin anymore until Bitcoin is 51% green, which, by the way, in the last year or two has actually surpassed that. Really started the crash, and I remember that day. It dropped probably 10,000 just that day alone. So that wouldn't have been a problem. I think that would have recovered. But then there was just a series of kind of like the .com boom, when you have these people that rush into to a new technology. And, you know, it seems like there was shit coins galore. New coins were coming out every other day. The market got very crowded and confused. People were looking for the next Bitcoin. And when you have that, you have people like Sam Bankman-Fried and Celsius and a handful of other companies that do what people do, which is they start businesses based on taking advantage of that greed by saying, hey, you know, you can start trading all these shit coins on our exchange. You know, if you want to give us some coin, we'll pay you, 2% interest on the coin you put in there. And what ends up happening is people put money in these exchanges, they put their coin in these exchanges, and then the company has no obligation to have any sort of reserve, and they sort of start investing in their next shit, or they create their own shit coin like Sam Bankman-Fried did. And your money's gone. Your money at that point is gone. The minute you look to shut this off, the minute you look to pull your coin back out, suddenly they don't have it. There's a bank run, which is what happened at SBF and Celsius, and suddenly they're not liquid enough to actually give you your money. What's ironic about that is exactly how central banks operate. That's exactly how institutional banks operate, right? With no requirement on, you know, having really any kind of reserve, 10%, if that. And it's all based on the hope that more than X% of people don't ever go in and ask for their money, because it's not there. It's invested in crap that you would never invest in. It's invested in stuff that can be very, very risky, that you have no control over. And that's why Satoshi created Bitcoin. It was exactly for that reason. So it's always funny when I see these exchanges becoming very, very popular and very, very big, and people putting their coin in. It's the antithesis of what, you know, Bitcoin was designed for. And so, you know, like I've been telling people forever, you know, it's okay to use an exchange to get your coin, but you have to get comfortable self-custodying. You have to get it off the exchange and into your possession, so that that exchange, now the CEO of that company, if he decides to overextend himself and make investments with the coin that's part of their assets within their exchange, that you don't lose your shirt. Your coin is safe. Your coin is on the blockchain. Save it on a thumb drive. Save the mnemonic seed on a hardware wallet. Write it on a piece of paper and put it in a safe. And that way it's untouchable to the exchanges. You use the exchanges for what they're for, and you get it out. You don't store your stuff there. So all of these exchange collapses just pile on to the sort of shit show that was the last, 18 months. It was just one disaster after another. And then people don't understand that Sam Bankman-Fried is not Bitcoin. People don't understand that these people are, if your bank, if your JP Morgan Chase bank gets, Jamie Dimon, the CEO, gets indicted for fraud, that doesn't mean your dollars are worth any more or less. It means they were fucking around with it in a way they shouldn't, but that doesn't have anything to do with the underlying asset. Unfortunately, the market is so, still so unsophisticated. You had a lot of, normal people who read this stuff in the news, and it's always portrayed as crypto. So Bitcoin gets lumped in with the shit coins, and people get afraid and say, screw this, I'm out. It also weeds out a lot of people who just went into it not understanding that this is not a short-term thing. When people ask me, I say, if you're going to buy it, you got to commit to at least 2 to 4 years, go through a full halving cycle before you make any decisions about dumping it. If you're going to try to time the market, and I'm going to buy some, if you think you're going to need this coin in the next 6 months, I tell people, don't buy it, because there's a chance you could catch it on a retrace and lose your shirt. So I don't try to trade. I don't know how to trade. I think very few people on the planet actually are capable of trading. I always hear these stories, and it reminds me of the people who tell you they won at the slot machines. They don't tell you about the 6 years they dumped their salary in a slot machine. You only hear about the time they won 10 grand. Big deal. 10 grand, over your lifetime, you probably spent 30 times that. So I personally don't have a lot of faith in this sort of trading model. It's more about buying pieces of a Bitcoin, whether it's $5, $10, $100, $200, and over time keep stacking that. And keeping that through the ups and the downs. So I haven't gotten rid of a single, Satoshi, a single piece of Bitcoin, even when it went down to 16,000, it doesn't make me happy to see that, but it's something I just ignore because I know it's only a matter of time until the market turns and people start to understand, how fundamentally important Bitcoin's going to be, and especially with what's going on in the world right now. So what happened? We saw it dip down to 16,000. The market, people started getting indicted, locked up. Basically, it was cleaning house of all the shitbirds pulling. We found out, that Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX were deliberately suppressing the price of Bitcoin during the trial. It came out that he had provided orders to his people to, keep selling, keep flooding the market with the Bitcoin they were in possession of, so that the price stayed low, so they could pump their FTT shitcoin and keep the value of their shitcoin high. So there was a lot of manipulation going on. So it's a really good thing that these people are out of business, and it's a really good thing that the world is starting to see that these, altruistic, whatever they call themselves, these people who purport to be, geniuses and the Mother Teresa of the world. Though I just want to give back, and 99.9% of the time, these Elizabeth Holmes types, these SBF types, they're all scumbags. They're all out to manipulate the market and gain as much power and influence as they can, donating to financial campaigns. It's all a scam. It's all bullshit. And like I said, it's the exact reason why Bitcoin was created, because you lose faith in people over enough period of time. You know that governments are going to debase your money, and people and banks are going to fuck you by lending out your money, by doing risky things with your money over a period of time. And in the end, they're going to either need a bailout from the government, who's going to print money to bail them out, which is going to debase your money. It's going to make your money worth less. And there's going to be no accountability along the way. So then what started the reason for it to pump? So it was probably around 20 something thousand, I think, maybe a few months ago now. And word that the Spot Bitcoin ETF, there was some movement on that. So what is a Spot Bitcoin ETF? A Spot Bitcoin ETF is something that funds, companies like BlackRock and Grayscale, management funds, people that manage other people's assets, right? That are sitting on literally trillions of dollars of assets under management for people's pensions and, you name it, any 401ks, any type of investment that you would go through. It runs through these, 11 companies, and it's something like $11 trillion that they're in assets that they're responsible for. And these companies want to be able to sell Bitcoin to their client base. They want to make Bitcoin accessible, not directly, right? Not saying, hey, we're like an exchange, and if someone wants to buy Bitcoin, we'll give them 0.00. They want nothing to do with that. What they want to do is they want to be able to have people invest on a dollar basis, take $50,000 of their IRA and move it over into a Spot Bitcoin ETF, where they get the equivalent value of Bitcoin that they're owed, right? That they're entitled to. But the customer never has to worry about self-custody, never has to worry about transferring it. And the reason why that part is important is because, one thing that I've learned over the last how many years is that people are very uncomfortable being responsible for themselves, right? There's like two types of people. There's people that, when the game's on the line and they're down by 6 points, they want the football. And the vast majority of the population is like, yeah, fuck it, give him the football. They want nothing to do with it. They don't want the pressure. They don't want the responsibility. They don't need they don't need the big win, and they don't need the big lose. They're just content to be sort of like in the background or on the field. And self-custody is taking the football, right? Self-custody of Bitcoin is saying, I'm going to become my own bank. I'm going to buy Bitcoin. I'm going to be responsible for maintaining it. I'm going to put it on a thumb drive. I'm going to put it in a safe. I'm going to put it wherever it is. And if I lose it, it's on me. There's no one I could go to get my money back. Now, for people like me, that's a very appealing proposition, because I hate relying on third parties. I hate relying on, being helpless. I don't like the feeling of being helpless. I like the idea that, I can find ways to do things myself, so that if something breaks, I can fix it, right? There's a problem, I can solve it. And so most people aren't like that. And so people who are interested in getting into Bitcoin, it's very scary prospect to get onto an exchange and buy some Bitcoin and move it over and be responsible for it. So this ETF, the Spot ETF, fixes that. It wraps Bitcoin in something very familiar to them, which is just an investment. And for the investment firms, right, for the family offices, all the way up to the firms that do corporate investments for pensions and things like that, this is a very familiar thing to them. This is taking something very unfamiliar and scary, because these places don't want to be holding Bitcoin for you. I guarantee you that. But what they can do is use the existing system that's in place to purchase Bitcoin for their clients, which they get commission on, of course, right? For any assets under management, they can get commission on that, and allocate whatever they deem right, 1%, 2%, 5%. So what happened a few months ago was that I think it was Grayscale had filed probably a year or so, longer than a year ago, a lawsuit against the SEC. They filed for Spot Bitcoin ETF. The SEC denied it. They fought the case. They won. The courts ruled that the SEC had no legitimate basis to deny the Spot Bitcoin ETF. When that news came in, the price of Bitcoin jumped within like 3 or 4 days of that, probably $2,000 to $3,000. And then as word was coming out that the SEC had acknowledged through some subsequent interviews that essentially they were in the process of, figuring it out to approve, at minimum Grayscale's, but there was Grayscale's ETF application, but there really was no basis to deny any of them at that point. So the market started to pump because people like me who track it pretty closely said, all right, well, this is a big deal. They missed their deadline to file their appeal, which basically meant they were acknowledging that the court decision they had no legal basis to contest the decision of the court. So now it meant that the path to the ETF was open. So then as that news started to gain traction, all the other companies that were interested in these ETFs renewed their applications and began renegotiations with the SEC on how to make this happen. And so as news began to spread of that, these conversations were happening, the price went up probably, it's up to 38,000 now. So I think it was around 20 something, low 20s when this started. So you're talking about, a 20% jump just in the last, few months. So everyone's kind of sitting and waiting for it. And the way it looks now, there's every indication that this is 99% going to happen. And even crazier to think about is it looks like the SEC is lining up these applications to approve all 11 at the same time. And this is supposed to happen really no later than middle of January. I think January 9th or 10th is the date that everyone's anticipating now based on the filings. So what does that mean? That means that when this happens, even if these funds recommend a very modest 1% allocation for their customers and clients into Bitcoin, you're talking about billions and billions of dollars flooding into Bitcoin in the next 6 to 12 months. Just that 1%, even if these firms are very, very conservative and they don't want to, the odds of at least one of these investment firms recommending 2, 3, or 5% is very high in my opinion. Someone's going to, this is where game theory kind of comes into play, is that someone's going to, BlackRock has been on like a press tour since the SEC, since the SEC failed to file their appeal and there was acknowledgement that this was going to happen. The CEO of BlackRock and the CEO of ARK and CEO of Grayscale have been on like a press tour, basically talking about how fantastic of an asset Bitcoin is, how it's quote unquote a flight to quality, and that even BlackRock did a study recently that they think the appropriate allocation for clients is something like 84% of their portfolio should be in Bitcoin. Do I think they're going to, push that? No, but that gives you an idea of where their head's at. This is the same company, right? I think, God, maybe not even 10 years ago was talking about Bitcoin was garbage, right? Bitcoin was essentially a scam. It had no intrinsic value. No one in there, nobody was asking them about it. Nobody. And it reminds me of the adoption of the internet, right? How in the early days it was like, oh, nobody's really shopping online. No one's asking Walmart to open up an online store. They like going to the store. Yeah, fast forward 10 years later, and 90% of their, 90% of shopping's done on the internet, right? So BlackRock's coming around. Fidelity has been really impressive. Fidelity is another firm that released an updated sort of analysis of Bitcoin that I've read twice now. And I've seen a couple of interviews with the author of that, and he truly gets it. The light bulb clearly went off for him as to what Bitcoin is and what it will be in the future. And these are companies that shit all over Bitcoin 10 years ago. They wanted nothing to do with it. They didn't understand it. It takes a lot of time to wrap your mind around what this is and how it works until you go from thinking it's a scam to realizing, it's one of the greatest, if not the greatest invention of our lifetimes. And especially now with the backdrop of what's coming up in the next year. So not only do we have in January, these 11 ETFs are very likely to get approved, which is going to cause an immediate jump in the price of Bitcoin. It's going to be all over the news. You also have the halving that's coming up for Bitcoin. And the halving, if you remember, I think we talked about this on the other podcast, is that every 4 years, programmatically, Bitcoin is designed without human intervention, that the issuance of Bitcoin, the amount of Bitcoin produced per year, is cut in half every 4 years. So Bitcoin blocks are found every 10 minutes, give or take. Whenever a Bitcoin block is found, that's where all the miners are basically doing this guessing game to find this random number. And the one who gets to that number first gets to process the next block, which is all the transactions that are pending, right? They're all queued up and ready to go into the next block. They not only get to file that block and add it to the blockchain, they get all the transaction fees, right? So all the little, fractions of a Bitcoin that you're charged when you start a Bitcoin transaction. They get also a reward, a block reward, and that gets cut in half every 4 years. And it lasts for 4 years each term. So right now, every time you discover a block and you file that next block of transactions, you get the transaction fees for processing, right? For lack of a better word. And you also get 6.25 Bitcoin. So 6.25 times 38,000, do the math, right? That's what your reward is. So those computers that help do that, to figure out that math, they get a percentage of that 6.25 Bitcoins based on what their horsepower that they threw, their hashing power that they threw at solving the problem. So if I only threw in a 1 horsepower motor's worth of energy in, I get, a commensurate amount. I get a little tiny slice. If I threw in 1,000 horsepower at solving that problem, I would get proportionally 1,000 times more than the person who threw 1 horsepower. So it's very fair and equitable how that works. And right now it's at 6.25. Come April of next year, give or take, because this is about every 10 minutes. So in early April of next year, that issuance is going to be cut in half. What does that mean is that it's by design. Satoshi created this to create a supply crunch every 4 years to increase the scarcity. But I think it's more about the perception of scarcity every 4 years. The difference being 90% of the Bitcoin's already been mined. The last 10% will take into the year 2140 to mine. So the last Bitcoin that's ever going to be mined is going to take about 30 years. I think that's the math on it or something like that. 30 years or some crazy shit. 3 years, 30 years, I forget. It's an insane number just to get to that last Bitcoin. So it's designed over time to produce a lot in the beginning. The original blocks were like 50 Bitcoin per block in the early days. But remember, Bitcoin is worth less than a penny. So you were getting a block, you could just use a regular computer, and every 10 minutes you can solve a block and you get 50 Bitcoin, which was worth nothing. But that meant if you solved one block back in 2009 or 10 and you just held that 50 Bitcoin, do the math, 50 times 38,000, you'd be a millionaire. So it's designed to cut that supply in half, which means that in a given year, it would be now 6.25 divided by 2. So 3.125 issued every 10 minutes, which now has to keep up with the demand. So you have what Bitcoin is in the market for sale, which is estimated that there are less than 2 million Bitcoin on exchanges that are sort of for sale. It's hard to really know, but they do this analysis by looking at wallets like people like, let's say, like me, who buy and move into wallets that I don't touch. They know that I'm a hodler, right? I'm not selling my Bitcoin. They know people who move their money back onto exchanges are typically people getting ready to sell. They're looking for some sort of price point, and people also obviously can set up auto sells that, if they hit certain marks, so they can look at those kind of things. And the estimate is there's about 2 million Bitcoin available in the market right now. And I think that means if you do the math and there's only roughly three Bitcoin issued, it's something like 900 Bitcoin will be issued, every year. There is just not going to be enough Bitcoin, because when you have companies like BlackRock, Fidelity, ARK, Grayscale, they have to buy Bitcoin when people buy Bitcoin from them. They can't sell paper Bitcoin. They can't go out and sell 1,000 Bitcoin to some pension fund and not go out and buy the asset, the underlying asset. At some point, very quickly after that purchase is put in, they have to actually acquire that. Otherwise, it's a total Ponzi scheme. You're back to fiat currency, right? You can't sell more than you actually own, because that's what happened to gold, and that's what happens to a lot of assets, is people sell paper versions of it. And you're like, once again, so this is all based on someone not actually going and saying, I want my gold bar now. Bitcoin can't operate like that, and the SEC is not going to let those investment funds operate like that either, because it would quickly result in people getting scammed. And because the SEC knows that Bitcoin is truly finite and there's only ever going to be 21 million, there is no option to go find more gold. There's no option to find more silver. There's no option to print more money. They cannot sell 30 million Bitcoin. There's never going to be 30 million. There isn't going to be, there isn't now, there isn't going to be 200 years from now. So the brilliance of Bitcoin is in part the scarcity, the actual fact that it is the only truly scarce asset in the history of mankind. You can always find more gold. You can always develop more real estate. You can always, find, more silver and precious metals. You can always print more money. You can't make any more Bitcoin. It's hard coded into the protocol that that's all there will ever be. So mathematically, it has to go up in value over time, because once the first person bought Bitcoin, there was going to be another person who's going to say, he's probably wrong, but I'm going to buy a little bit more than him just in case. And game theory kicks in. And when these investment funds come in, and you're talking about trillions and trillions of dollars at play, and they start going to these exchanges. So the agreement is, I think Coinbase is going to be the go-to exchange to provide the Bitcoin to at least Grayscale, to at least BlackRock. I think, I'm not sure about all the other, who they're going to be using, but there's only a handful of really legitimate exchanges left. There's going to be a supply crunch, because there's going to be that 2 million Bitcoin that's supposedly on the market is going to get wiped out quickly. And then after that, you're only producing 3 Bitcoin every 10 minutes. That's it. 3 Bitcoin every 10 minutes. Now, when you're talking about Grayscale, BlackRock, they're not going in buying 5 Bitcoin. They're going to buy 5,000 Bitcoin, 10,000 Bitcoin. They're not fucking around. This isn't a little, this guy wants, they're going to go and take, someone's investment fund and say, hey, you're going to allocate 1%. That's $2 million into Bitcoin. Okay, let me go buy $2 million of Bitcoin at Coinbase. So how quickly and how likely is the scenario? And in my opinion, it's very likely that we're going to see in 2024 and in 2025, you're just not going to be able to get Bitcoin on exchanges. It's going to dry up. There's going to be a massive supply crunch based on these ETFs, based on the price that's going to start to go to skyrocket. And normal people who have been sleeping on this for the last 15 years are going to try to log into Gemini and Coinbase, and you're going to find we don't have enough, or there's going to be some crazy fee attached to it because they can't, for them to even get the Bitcoin from the miners. There's even rumors now that Grayscale and these other investment funds are going directly to the Bitcoin miners to buy their Bitcoin, bypassing the exchanges, because they know that as they're trying to supply themselves now, they're doing it now. They're buying. They have to be collecting Bitcoin now to be ready for this thing in January. They're not waiting till January. They have permission to go out and buy this Bitcoin and start stockpiling it. So the price has gone up, which is reflective of definitely the institutional purchases. But the rumors are that they're going directly to the miners for the Bitcoin so that they don't have to go through the exchanges, which have a more immediate reaction. If someone buys 10,000 Bitcoin off an exchange, that's monitored very closely. People are going to see that, and it's going to cause the price to jump. They don't want the price to jump now. They're trying to get this as cheap as they can. I think half of them are responsible for that dog shit article that's been floating around Twitter on Bitcoin uses a swimming pool's worth of water per. I mean, the most nonsensical, analysis I've ever read. It was written like looks like by a 5-year-old. Bitcoins don't operate on water; they operate on electricity. Bitcoin, some miners can be cooled by water, which is only a certain percent, a small percentage of them, and it's recycled water. Is this like boiling off? Like, they're implying that it's boiling? And the idea of being able to identify how much electricity a transaction works would be like trying to analyze how much energy does an email cost. It doesn't. There's no way to tease out the cost of an email. How do you factor that in? Blocks are mined, and thousands of transactions are included in every block. How do you possibly tease out the cost of one transaction and say it would boil off, I guess, a swimming pool? It's just nonsense. But I think, jokingly, like some of these firms, this is exactly what I expect to see. There's going to be a lot of FUD, a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt put into the media over the next 3 months to keep this price as low as they can so that BlackRock and Fidelity and all these companies can buy all this Bitcoin, while you're left wondering when the God candle comes in and it's $200,000 a coin, and you're like, maybe I should create a Coinbase account now. It's gone. They own all the Bitcoin at that point. It's good luck. The price is going to be $200,000. Now, do I think it's going to stop? No, it's going to end up hitting $1 million, $5 million, $10 million. By the time I die, it's going to be $50 million a coin. So there's still reason to keep stacking it. This idea that you missed it is a common defeatist mentality that people have. I thought I missed it when it hit 100. I was in Bitcoin in 2012 when it was well under 100. When it hit 100, I remember being in my squad area at the FBI, and I was thinking about buying a Bitcoin miner, and I was like, I missed it. Luckily, I ended up buying 2 or 3 miners, and I was mining Bitcoin at my house just for the sort of technical challenge and curiosity of it to learn about it. But I honestly thought at that point I had missed it. And I was mining almost a quarter of a Bitcoin a day from my fucking garage, right? That was nothing back then. It was like $10. It was barely enough to cover my electricity. So, but the point is that time is running out in the sense that this is a new chapter for Bitcoin, in my opinion, right? You have sort of the early stage, which is coming to an end, right? The early adopter stage. When this ETF is approved, in my mind, that stage is done. When you have BlackRock buying and selling Bitcoin, you're not an early adopter anymore. Your opportunity to front run these companies that are, really the ones running the world, right? These companies like BlackRock are really behind everything. They own everything. They're market makers. Your opportunity to front run these people and realize the value of Bitcoin before they did is coming to an end in January. And then the chapter turns, and the next chapter is, okay, well, now it's becoming more mainstream. When you can invest a portion of your pension fund in it, you're not an early adopter anymore. This is something that you're kind of in the next phase, which is, the mainstream acceptance, early mainstream acceptance. And those types of things can drive the price of Bitcoin to scary prices very, very quickly. And that's something that frustrates me, because there's a joke about, like, on Thanksgiving, I almost made it through the Thanksgiving holiday without going on a rant about it, because, you have family that's over and friends, and you care about them, and you want to help them. But it's a tough conversation to have, because some of these people have been in denial since, I've been telling them about this since it was $100. And it's like this constant, I missed it. Oh, if I only could have gotten it for insert price from a year ago. Well, a year from now, today is going to be a year ago. A year from now, you're going to go back and say, well, geez, I should have bought it at 38,000. Now it's 75. It's way out of my league. And it just never ends. And you want to shake your friends and family and say, this is something that is going to change the world. So what else is happening in the backdrop? So you have the ETF coming up. You have the halving, which every 4 years when this halving happens, the price bumps big time. Go back and look at the charts. Every 4 years, right around when it happens or shortly thereafter, there's a huge bull run for Bitcoin. And that's by design. It's programmed like that because it creates scarcity, and we react to that scarcity and go, holy shit, now there's even half of it's being issued. Maybe I should buy some. Maybe I should buy some. What else do you have happening? I don't know. How about the financial collapse of the world? I don't know how much worse it could be, where I've never seen something where it's so bad and yet we're consumed by Elon Musk tweet about some whatever, instead of the $38 trillion we're in debt, and the fact that the national debt has grown more in the last 3 years than it did probably the 10, 15 years prior. So you're talking about from 2019, 2017, I think, to now, it's gone parabolic. It has gone from like 20 trillion to 38 trillion. We're going to hit 39 trillion before the end of the year. And there's no way out of it. People say, what does the debt matter? We've always had debt. What does it matter? Here's why it matters. It matters because we pay interest on that. When we owe money to nations, there's interest. When we owe money to central banks, there's interest on that. And there's only a few ways the government can pay that off. And listen to how hysterical these ways are. This is what has to happen if you believe that there's not going to be a financial collapse, or we're not going to have complete and utter debasement of our currency in the next couple of years. Here's what you're telling me when you tell me that. You're saying, hey, Vinny, I believe that our government is going to be responsible and cut spending drastically so that we can go from being negative to neutral or highly positive, meaning we'll have a surplus of money at the end of each year because the government's going to spend more, right? Think of it like a credit card. You're 20,000 in debt on your credit card. One of the ways out of it is that next year, when you're paying this interest, that you just cut back. You stop going out. You're like, all right, all of our money, we're going to have barely enough to just eat ramen noodles. We're going to watch Netflix every weekend. We're not going on any vacations. We're putting all of our money towards paying off the debt. If you believe the country, I don't care who wins, because a lot of this debt started under Trump when the pandemic started. And then Biden just said, hold my fucking, my beer, and, gave out like another 6 trillion. On top of that, we're now involved in one proxy war, and borderline, we're still providing, of course, support to Israel now too, with what happened in a few months ago. And we have this administration going on the news laughing. We have Biden laughing and Yellen laughing, saying, we can have two wars. We're the United States. We're the most powerful country in the history of mankind. And he laughs and he smiles. We can afford two wars. It's hard to process that level of recklessness, to believe that every other empire that has ever existed, you read the history books and you go, oh my God, the Romans were fucking idiots. The French were idiots. The British were idiots. No, they were all exactly like our politicians are now. Hubris, arrogance. We can afford it. We can print money into infinity. We can keep printing money. We're the United States. We're too big to fail. And so argument one is we're going to cut back spending. We're not cutting back spending. We're getting involved in wars overseas. We're sending billions and billions and billions of dollars every single month to these countries to help fight these wars that, for what? For what? So they're not going to cut spending, right? Okay, so what's option two? Option two is they raise taxes, right? Option two is the government doesn't produce shit, right? Government doesn't make money. They spend money. So where do they get their money from? Us. They tax us, right? So when the administration hires 80,000 IRS auditors, right, that's a good indication of where their head is at, because they see the impending collapse and they know they're broke dick. So they're going to go out and tax the shit out of everyone. So they mask it as, oh, tax the rich. And then they change the definition of rich. So ultimately, you or I or anyone else is qualified as mega wealthy because, well, compared to the world, if you make $50,000 a year, you got to pay your fair share. This idea of taxing billionaires, oh, we would raise another $400 billion a year if we tax. What's that? What's that, like 20 missiles? A couple of fucking aircraft? That's nothing. The billionaires of this country cannot support the nation, no matter how many billions they have. When you're talking about what our spending is in the trillions, that's nothing. It's a fraction. It buys us another month. So so they're not going to tax us. It's an election year coming up in 2024. Who's going to be the guy who either wins and taxes the shit out of us? If Biden wins, he's not going to raise taxes in and around that time or even after that time because he doesn't give a shit. Even if Trump or whoever wins, no one wants to deal with the harsh reality of being, taxed to death, especially when, why are we being punished for the irresponsible spending of the government? So that's just a non-starter, in my opinion. They'll try to tax certain subset of the population, but they're never going to get nearly enough to make it matter. And it wouldn't matter anyway, by the way. They'd have to tax to death to get at the $38 trillion debt under control. So what's the last solution? The last solution is you print your way out of the problem. You print the money to pay off the debt. You say, well, how can that be possible? How could you owe money and then if you don't have it, you just go to the back room, start the photocopy machine, and you come out with a stack of photocopied money? How is that possible? Not only is it possible, this is what happens. They print the money and they settle their debt. And then about 3 to 6 months later, there is billions and billions of additional dollars in circulation that weren't there before, which now makes your dollars worth less. So this is why they talk about inflation and debasement of currency being an invisible tax. It's brilliant. It's brilliant as it is evil, right? It's the idea that the government doesn't have to ask you permission to print money. They can just do it whenever they want. So when they want to go to war, they just print fucking money and go to war. We don't get to vote on it anymore. And we just accept this. When they get in debt and they have to pay, they print the money to pay off the debt. And everyone goes, well, who cares? It didn't bother me. Not today, it didn't bother you. 6 months from now, when you go to the store and it costs $40 for a cheeseburger, that's when the light bulb should go off that, oh, this is how they fucked me. They printed the money, which made it worth less, which now means when I go to the store, everything costs more. Nothing costs more. Your dollar's worth less. It doesn't cost more to make a hamburger today than it did 3 years ago. In fact, it costs less to produce virtually everything. The cost of production goes down over time. The reason why it's going up in cost is because your dollar is worth 75% of what it was 3 years ago. And it's worth 50% of what it was 15 years ago. And it's worth 25% of what it was worth 60 years ago. So this is why Bitcoin was invented, because over time, governments will debase your currency into being worth nothing until one day it's $100 for a Big Mac. So what is the incentive under this model to save? If you're a rational person and you want to save for college and you want to save for a rainy day, and you take your $5 and you put it under your mattress and you save $10,000 or $20,000, what is your incentive to do that when by the time you would need it 20 years later, that $10,000 has the buying power of $5,000 at that time? What did you just do? What did you just do? You just said, I took half my money and I threw it out the window, and now it's only worth half of that, but I'm a saver. There's no incentive for normal people to save. The only way out of this is to try to invest. And the majority of the population in the United States, they're not investing shit. They're not investing shit. And even the stock market's, over time going to shit, right? Every time I meet with my money people the last few years, it's just like this painful, oh yeah, this is down, this is down, this is down, this is down. Everything's fucking down. So it has a ripple effect. And, there's not a lot of hard assets people have access to that don't have costs associated. We can go buy real estate and, fucking, manage real estate and get taxed to death, or rent out a building and have to deal with tenants and rent and evictions. Yeah, this is a real fucking moneymaker, right? So this is by design. It's to keep everyone poor. It's to keep you living hand to mouth, hand to mouth, hand to mouth. Savings? What savings? 99% of people you talk to have no savings. They're living paycheck to paycheck. Even to get them to buy Bitcoin is a struggle because it's the same philosophy. Why? And you try to explain to people, because this is something that's going to go up in value tremendously over the next 2, 5, 10 years. This is a way out because the government can't print more Bitcoin. They can attack it other ways and try to tax it and but the genie's out of the bottle with Bitcoin. It's 15 years in. The government's opportunity to crush Bitcoin, in my opinion, that ship has sailed. And the SEC approval of these spot ETFs, if that doesn't officially let you know that the government is basically waving the white flag and implicitly saying that they're done. There's no legal basis to stop this from happening. And the Bitcoin protocol, unlike these other shit coins that have crazy ass CEOs and centralized control where they can manipulate who gets what, and they can reverse transactions, and they can print more of their shit coin, and they can make themselves rich while they keep everyone else sort of like chasing that carrot. Bitcoin doesn't have that. Bitcoin's like, Cyberdyne. It's basically been started. It's headless. It's everywhere. It's nowhere. There's no CEO to sue. There's no board. There's no marketing team. There's no one to go after. It's a computer network that's running on its own. That's a bunch of ones and zeros and hashing power that the government can't do anything about, except hopefully, in their mind, try to close off ramps where if you try to spend it, they'll tax it, or they can come to you and try to seize it. Yeah, good luck getting private keys from private citizens. Good luck. They'll come and take your gold. They'll come and take your gold from your house. Where are you going to hide gold bullion, gold bars? Try getting on a plane with a sack of gold. Try hiding gold in your house. You can keep Bitcoin in your head. You can memorize 12 words and Bitcoin's in your head. It doesn't exist anywhere physically. It's in your head. So, when you look at what the options are for the government, like somebody with a big credit card debt, and what they're essentially, as I see it, three major options. Oh, and the other option is, of course, the GDP of the country. If the economy grows, think of it like, you're a company in debt, you could release a new product and suddenly you have influx of, capital. You can use that to pay off your debt, which would mean our economy would have to grow, very, very quick, very, 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 very strategically, so that you have, more, organic tax dollars coming in from a new Amazon comes out, a new whatever. And now suddenly there's like this big boom and there's people being hired and it's triggering all their other industries. And now people are building houses and the economy starts to grow, which means we're becoming richer as an economy. And that's a possibility as well. But I don't know, based on what we're seeing. You have the White House cramming down our throats how great everything is, and it's the greatest Thanksgiving since, let me look back, last year. Wow, that's a huge metric to gauge yourself against yourself. Yeah, we had a really shitty last year. This year's not as shitty. Anyone I talk to feels the same thing I feel. My daughter went to the supermarket last week to buy some stuff for us, for the family, and she came back. She was like, "Why is it so expensive?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's inflation. It's not expensive. Your dollar is weak." And now our dollar is strong against other dollars. But that's like the prettiest girl in Pittsburgh analogy, right? Like, so what? You're strong against the euro. You're strong. Yeah, they're all collapsing as well. Look at the value of the dollar against the value of Bitcoin, and it's bleeding to death. Everything priced in terms of the value of Bitcoin goes down in price over time. And that's the way it's designed. That's what it's designed to do. That's why it's so brilliant. And so the way I look at it is, the government is going to continue to make bad decisions, continue to make wrong decisions, really, honestly, regardless of who wins the election, because I think we're kind of past the event horizon on this. And so you have to start looking at escape plans. And you can buy, precious metals. Gold went up a little bit. Gold went up to like $230 an ounce, which for the last 10 years, gold is like, I don't know, probably slightly 1% in the last 10, 15 years. Gold is up like 1-2%. I mean, it's better than fiat. I'll give you that. Gold is better than cash, but Bitcoin's up 120% this year alone. Bitcoin's up like a gazillion percent since inception. Bitcoin's up. I mean, it's the fastest growing asset in human history. It got to $1 trillion faster than any asset in history. It's worth more than Visa and MasterCard combined. It's somewhere in the area probably of $800 billion. And once it hits 100,000, I think we're past the trillion dollar mark. So it's going to be worth more than Apple and Google and everybody else and Microsoft inside of 15 years, 16 years, 17 years, from nothing to being worth more than that. And again, when people say, what could the price go to? It's honestly infinity. I wish I was, I'm feel privileged that I'm witnessing this and I could be a part of this and see this, but it really makes me wonder 20 years from now, 30 years from now. I mean, hopefully I'm still around, but 10 million a coin, 20 million a coin would not shock me in the slightest. Would not shock me in the slightest. So that's my message to everybody. Not investment advice. It's something that it's not, you got to make decisions for yourself. But to me, it's just, with everything going on, this is the, opportunity of a lifetime for so many families. And it makes me sick to know that how much struggling people are, the struggles that they're going through because of this. And, how everyone's just trying to do the right thing and go to work every day and, go to school and get an education, and this whole idea of a promise of a better future, and, we're talking about opening our borders and just bringing everybody in. That's, here's more money. Here's a migrant tax, New York. Get ready for that. They're not responsible. We're in debt and we're taking on, imagine being poor. It's like when I see poor people who have like 4 dogs. Like, how are you poor and on welfare, but you have 4 fucking dogs? You can't do that. You can't have an iPhone. You can't have an Infinity in the driveway. But that's what our government is. That's what they do. There's no sense of like responsibility. There's no sense of like pumping the brakes. It's just, it's just a race to the bottom. So that's my prediction for the next year. I mean, the January is going to be insane. I think there's a chance it jumps up well above $100,000. And I think there'll be some sort of, FUD that's released around that time that people get freaked out and will sell. And it'll have some sort of crash down to $50,000, $60,000. And then, a month or two after that, it'll bounce back and you realize it was all bullshit because it was Grayscale and all those other organizations trying to tank the price so they can buy more. And then you'll find out after the fact that, oh my God, it was a ruse to try to suppress the price and it worked. And then it'll skyrocket. And over the next 12 months to 24 months, it's going to be well into the 6 figures. So take it for what it's worth. That's my take on the current situation. I've been looking forward to talking about this topic for a while. So I hope you guys enjoyed the episode and allowed me to indulge myself with this rant. Be good out there, and I'm gonna cut another episode tomorrow and change the topic to something not as depressing. So take care, everybody.